Please join me in welcoming Governor Matt Bevin.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. This is a wonderful turnout. And thank you for thanking all those who really helped make this possible, because at the end of the day, I'll reiterate that only to say this only works when people get engaged. It's like government, it's like the business community, it's like chambers of anything or associations of anything. It takes individuals like ourselves to go above and beyond. And so thank you for stepping up as chairman. Thank you for the leadership that people are willing to provide on so many fronts. You know, I'm sure it was the big money that they paid you, and they're going to be paying you for all of the extra work and the grief that you take. And I mean this sincerely. From the moment you step into these roles as chairman of this or chairman of that, you don't necessarily, you're not doing it because you're going to get any personal benefit typically. You may be helping things you care about in your community, but from the moment you step into some of these positions, you find yourself with 1,000 people who don't even know you, that have ideas of how you could do what you're doing better and what you're doing wrong here, there, and everywhere. But it has always taken men and women willing to step up and do that. So for those of you that are volunteers on any front, thank you for that. I really, truly am grateful to you. In our time here, we are going to have, I think last time I stood before you, I don't know if it was the very last time, but one of the times, we were in a different room here downtown somewhere, and there was a stack of cards, and I was reading through them all and trying to answer them. And we've now got, you know, some computerized version of that. And the wonderful thing about this, and I would encourage you to take advantage of it, it is anonymous this way too. The other ones were, I don't think I remember reading people's names off, but you send any question. I want to take whatever questions you have. This is the decision you're going to have to make here in the next 3 weeks, is who's going to be the next governor of this state. And I can tell you right now, if you haven't figured it out already, I'm not a perfect person, and I'm not going to become perfect in the next 4 years if I'm your next governor. The fellow that I'm running against is not perfect and isn't going to become perfect in the next 4 years either. There's no person in this room who is. You can't pick part of me and part of the other guy, or part of yourself and part of some person who's not in the race. You get one of the two of us. And I am grateful to hear that he's going to be speaking to you. He has ducked most other such things. But you all are owed that. You really are. He wouldn't speak to the state chamber. He wouldn't speak to the superintendents or the school board people or the realtors or the Kentucky League of Cities or the Farm Bureau people or any number of other groups like yourselves. Maybe now the memorized, parts have all been locked in. I don't know. But you're probably going to get some plastic memorized fluff. I would encourage you, ask hard questions then too. And I mean that sincerely. You shouldn't be getting fluff from people. In 3 weeks, you're going to choose the next CEO of this state. And whoever that person is going to have to be equipped through life experience, through intellectual curiosity, through the ability to attract people around them and bring the best and brightest to the table in various cabinet level positions, etc., to move this state forward. I mean, in reality, this is a big, big decision that you have on your radar screen. And I won't go through a whole lot of talk before we open it up to questions, but let me back up just a little bit. 4 years ago at this time, I was just some business guy like yourselves. This is the first political job I've ever had. Never took a political science course in my life. Never imagined that someday, hey, I know what I'll do. I'll be governor. I'll run for something. But a few months prior to that, I had thrown my hat in the ring. It was a close election in the primary. Every single survey, every poll said we had no shot. We weren't going to win. We were losing. We were going to lose by big numbers. The closest we ever were was down by 5. Wasn't even within the margin of error. It was a given that we in Kentucky were going to stay on the same kind of crooked, backwards, slow, corrupt track that we've been on, sadly, for generations in this state. And there was a belief on the part of myself that we deserved better, and that to the best of my ability, I was going to at least try to offer an alternative to that. And that there were enough people like yourselves, like-minded people, business-minded people, people that were fed up with the good old boy network and the fact that states who are less than us on so many logistical, geographic, and any number of other fronts have been eating our lunch for no good reason, as we've lain somewhat dormant. And I believe that there was enough desire on the part of people like that to choose something different. If you remember, 4 years ago, I had what I called a blueprint for a better Kentucky. And it laid out in writing during the primary and the general election 7 things, and they were all political losers. They really were. I had no delusion that they were anything other than that. The very first one of them was to become a right-to-work state. Not exactly a great way to curry favor among some of the louder constituencies in our state. They also included things like modernizing our tax code, addressing our pension crisis, things like shrinking the size of state government, reforming and removing corruption within state government, bringing some kind of choice to parents and students in our state, where we were at that time one of 7 states with 0 competition for public education dollars. And had we been above median and not buried deep down in the 30s and not having moved one lick since the initial bounce off of the carrot floor that we were on, then I could say that why change things. But truth be told, on any number of fronts, without a preconceived notion as to what the net result needed to look like, I believed that on all those issues and others, that we needed to have an honest 21st century adult conversation about what is best for Lexington, what is best for Fayette County, for Kentucky, for fill in the blank. And for us to be able to put these on the table and have a conversation among ourselves and just say, what should we be doing? Where should we prioritize? What should we change? And I put these in writing. I called it a blueprint for a better Kentucky, as I said. And everybody said that's how you won't get elected, because you don't ever put it in writing, and you frankly don't even want to talk about these things. Every one of those is somewhat of a kiss of death. They were all considered sort of political third rails. You don't want to talk about it when you're running. Maybe if you get elected, maybe you can go there. And bear in mind, I put these out there when Republicans, which I happen to be, had 44 out of 100 seats in the legislature 4 years ago at this time. So 44 out of 100 seats, it wasn't even likely politically that these things would have much of a more than a snowball's chance and whatever. And so to that end, people are like, why even talk about that? Why run the risk of incurring all this wrath from people and putting yourself out there? And I'll tell you why. Same reason I'm running for again. We deserve better than we've had. And again, for what it's worth, I'm willing to try to take point on that and try to offer that to us and be the person who's willing to try to fight for these things. And I honestly believed that we were better than, smarter than, bolder than, more desirous of these things than we had ever been given credit for. And by we, I mean the people, all of us, 4.5 million of us, but especially the taxpayers and business owners and job creators and the people that are represented by many in this room, that all of us were much more capable than people had given us credit for, and that we as a state was better than what we have often been pictured as. And I was weary, frankly, as a 20-plus year resident now of this state, of us always seeming to live down to people's stereotypical impression of us, in us laying dormant while other people zipped past us. I think we're better than this. We're a state blessed with amazing geography, amazing logistical capabilities, amazing riverways, roadways, airways, amazing resources, potable water, an abundance of natural resources, low energy costs, the things that the world is looking for: quality of life, cost of living, values and orientation, work ethic, this melding of southern sensibilities, and hospitality and graciousness with Midwestern sensibilities and work ethic in this magical, beautiful place where there's days like this outside, on a date like this, that there are very few places in America that offer this. All of this in the middle of the last geopolitically stable continent on planet Earth. And in the middle of that continent is the United States, in the middle of that country is us, and we're right here. How can we not take advantage of this? How can we not dust ourselves off, hold ourselves up, and let the world see this gem that we have? This was my motivation then. This was my reason for putting out 7 political losers. And indeed, every poll that was done said we were going to lose. Well, obviously we won handily by 9%. Why? Because everything was perfect? Because everybody was happy? No. Everybody that was worked up now was worked up then. There was much angst, much weeping and gnashing of teeth, many threats of skies falling and all these terrible things. But the reality is we have started to make transformational change. And it's interesting. I mean, some of these things we've addressed outright, others of which we're still on our way to addressing. I hope it comes up at some point. If it doesn't, maybe I'll weave it in. But we haven't fixed the pension problem in this state. And if there's anything that should concern any of you in this room, whether you personally expect to get a pension from this state, or whether somebody you care about does, or whether you as a business owner realizes you're going to be holding the bag one way or the other, whether you get a check or not, you should care about the pension issue. Because we have the worst funded pension system in America. We have not fixed it. There is much work yet to be done. Somebody said to me, it's been some weeks now, they said, oh, you just bring that up because it helps you politically. Really? Really? How's that working for me? Is that a good strategy? Should I keep my foot on that gas for the next 3 weeks? I mean, it's an absolute political loser. But I'm not doing this, and I hope you understand this. I don't need or want this job badly enough, nor do I want to keep it badly enough to lie to you or blow smoke at you in order to get it. I'm not going to stand here and promise pay raises here and, increases in funding here and, this, that, and the other thing, all of which there's $0 to pay for. I mean, that's just a bunch of lies, and you know it. Believe me, nobody would love, who doesn't want to be the governor that increases funding for everybody and gives everybody pay raises? Everybody would like to be that governor. Nobody wants to be the governor that actually addresses the pension crisis, or modernizes our tax code, or does any of those other things that I mentioned. I mean, everyone wants to ride the pony, but nobody wants to clean the barn. We've had 100 years worth of political stuff piling up in the barn in Kentucky for a long, long time. And we're in the barn shoveling years. We are, and this is where we are. Some of you have done this for real. In all seriousness, in barns in the springtime, stuff piles up after long winters. We've had a long political winter. And the amount of corruption, you don't see it covered much. The number of people from the last immediate past administration and who have worked for, under his time as Attorney General, the guy that I'm running with, the number of those people that are now in federal prison and the number of others that are going to federal prison should concern you. Because so many of the people in the back of the room who should be covering this are voting for that and want that for reasons that blow my mind and I can't comprehend, because they and their kids and grandkids live here too. Nonetheless, they pretend it didn't happen, but it is happening. And we deserve better than this. I'm tired of seeing our hard-earned tax dollars being misappropriated by people who are trying to feather their own nests. And so to that end, this is why I stand before you. Not to blow smoke, not to try to patronize you, not to say that everything is rosy and that we're not going to continue to have hard challenges ahead of us. Quite the opposite. But I will say this, and then let's open it up to your questions. We've never in the history of the state had more people working than we have right now. Lowest unemployment, highest level of workforce participation, greatest amount of revenue that we've ever had, even though we have cut our personal and corporate income taxes by 17%, even though we've cut regulation and we've made it easier now for people to do business because time is money. We've had $22 billion in private capital invested in this state in the last 3.5 years. We have never in any 10-year period in our history had that kind of capital invested in Kentucky. Why? Because we have it all figured out and suddenly everything is rosy? No. But because we're being honest and we're acknowledging things and we're taking them head on. And we're out there hustling because, as Abraham Lincoln famously said, a famous son of ours, actually not so famously said, most people have never heard this unless you've heard me say it, because I say it often. Abraham Lincoln said, good things may come to those who wait, but only the things left behind by those who hustle. And there's a lot of truth in that. And we have out-hustled people. I'll give you 2 quick examples of that, and then let's get ready to start queuing up your questions. And we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. When everybody was chasing HQ2, and again, let me back up even from that. I am a business guy. I'm an entrepreneur. I've started a number of companies, many of them here, some of them in other states, companies that have done business around the world, although predominantly in the U.S. Nonetheless, I've traveled to 50-some countries. I've seen a lot of things. I've been in every one of our 50 states. And bear in mind, I'm a kid. I never even flew in an airplane until I was 17. I won a trip through 4-H. I grew up in a 3-bedroom house with no shower, no central heat, no television, sharing a bedroom with my 3 brothers. I mean, this is the American dream. A kid like me who can be afforded that opportunity, and now to be good friends with and able to have a regular conversation with the president and vice president of our country, with cabinet secretaries, with other world leaders, Prime Minister Modi, in India. European leaders are ambassadors to these countries. This is possible because America affords people the very thing that you as business people aspire to and help your employees to pursue. But it doesn't happen by accident. And it comes as a result of getting out there and hustling and working. And when everybody was chasing HQ2 with Amazon in recent years, and everyone wanted half the brain because the original brain of Amazon is out in Seattle, and they said we're going to morph our brain into somewhere else, and so everybody in America competed. Everybody wanted HQ2. So too did we and people around here, fair enough. But I said, while everyone's chasing half the brain, I want the whole heart of this company. And what is this company? It's not just a retailer, it's a logistics company. They just move goods to market, and increasingly so. And it became clear to me that the true hub and heart of this company is based on things we already have a core ability in. So in going and intentionally, proactively making the case to them as to why not have your heart here. We were told initially this is a decision we're not going to make now. It'll take at least 2 years. I said, why 2 years? The amount of regulation, the amount of red tape, the amount of permitting and licensing and time and all of the stuff that goes on. I wear this little button because early on, when I had a divided House and Senate, I said, let me focus on things that everybody can agree on, cutting red tape. Since I got elected, in this state, when I was elected, we had 130,000 different rules rolled up inside of 4,700 regulations. We have modernized or completely eliminated 28% of those and counting. Thousands and thousands of rules gone. Things that were just redundant or ineffective, or nobody bothered to even look at the efficacy of them to see whether they ever did anything. They never sunset, they just stay on into perpetuity. And this was the mindset that people like Amazon, among others, had, because this is their experience with every state everywhere. And as we've started to be more intentional about helping people to get to yes or no more quickly than other places, when we sat down with Amazon and said, why would it take 2 years? And they told us, I said, what if we could get everybody from Kentucky, myself, every cabinet official, every zoning person, every airport official, every lawyer, everybody that you would need to have in one room at one time, could you get the same equivalent of people from Amazon? And this is ultimately what we did. And over the course of about a 10-hour day, we got done about 80% of what they thought would take them 2 years to do. There's people even in this room, business people here. No thanks to people who should have made this something that was cause for celebration, but have intended instead to make sure that it never got known and have buried it in large measure. Amazon is building their world prime air hub, shipping hub in Kentucky. You know, when Jeff Bezos and I a couple months ago were in Kentucky breaking ground on this, I mean, it was like a tree falling in the middle of the woods. Yawn. You know, oh, hey, shiny squirrel. You know, I mean, seriously, it's embarrassing. I've never seen a state, and I mean this sincerely, I've never seen a state where especially print media has such self-loathing of the place that they represent. We celebrate the negative, we celebrate in anything divisive, and we fail to celebrate the greatness of us coming together, people of different ideas, but celebrating one Kentucky. And these are the kind of things that are happening. We just went out and out-hustled people for that. It's an initial $1.5 billion investment of capital expenditure, but thousands of jobs. And if you think it will be just $1.5 billion in just a few thousand jobs, you're kidding yourself. It'll be that the way the UPS World Shipping Hub has turned out to be that. That has turned out to be billions and billions and billions of investment. Now 22,000 employees working for UPS. And this has the potential to be all that and then some as this becomes another world hub. This is at CVG. These are the kind of things that are happening. The final one I'll say is this, Nucor, steel mill, and we could name other ones as well, including UPS, which was making the decision to expand, bring new planes, new technicians, new engineers, new logistics experts, and was looking to go to other places. And we had to go and hustle and compete against 3 other states to have them do it here. And indeed, UPS just announced another $750 million, another 1,000 jobs at $70 an hour, $145 million annual payroll. You think that's not going to help everyone in Kentucky? Of course it is. That's not even the second one I was going to tell you about, Nucor, which was looking at several different states. We were arguably in the mix, but they already had a presence here. They weren't looking here. But we went out and out-hustled people and outworked it. Literally the day they made the announcement that they're building the most advanced steel mill in the country today, in Kentucky, there were 2 other governors in 2 other states who only that day were called and told it wasn't coming to them because they believed that it might. We've just outworked people. We used to sit back and wait for our lunch to be eaten. Now we're out eating other people's lunch. It's a kind of a nice change of pace. Really is. So my point is this. You're going to have a decision here in the next 3 weeks, 3 weeks from today. I beg of you of all, if you do nothing else, this flag that's over my shoulder right here, this American flag, about 1.5 million people have died since the inception of this nation in defense of the values represented by that flag. Guys that I served with are dead, who've been dead for years, whose kids have grown up without a father, who came home in boxes that were draped in that flag. It's pathetic that 30-something% of us will even bother to vote, and it breaks my heart that even in this room of engaged, thoughtful people, there are some among you that will not vote. We deserve better than that. You deserve better than that. Your employees and the people you care about in your communities deserve better than that. We do. And bear in mind that only 6 out of 10 people that are eligible to vote, are even registered. I mean, we've got work yet to do, but a government of and by and for the people, we're it. We're it. And in 3 weeks, you're going to choose somebody to lead this state forward. Somebody who's going to sit across the table from the CEOs of whether it's an Amazon or a Nucor or a whoever and have conversations on behalf of your state. I hope you get to talk to my opponent. And I hope you ask yourself honestly, which of the 2 of us you'd want negotiating on your behalf. I think it will be pretty marked. In my case, I've created many, many jobs in the private sector. I've started many companies. Companies that have started that were an idea in my head have generated hundreds of millions of dollars in payroll and taxes spent in goods and services bought and sold, dollars floating around in the economy, resuscitating our communities in this state, in other states, versus a guy who literally has never created a job in his entire life, not one, not a single job ever. Or at least arguably not one that you didn't pay for. Maybe as Attorney General, he's hired people. He didn't create those jobs. He's using your money to hire people. Incidentally, he's got 86 attorneys that you pay for. He's sued me about 10 times. He's sued our legislature. He sues businesses. He sues things. He's done nothing. He's brought in $0. Fighting the opioid crisis. One thing that I want you to understand, that has been a big problem for our state. The Attorney General has in his entire life been involved in one settlement with an opioid producer, and it was Purdue Pharma. And he was the lawyer, he and his firm, that were defending them against Kentucky. That is the only case he's ever won. And for all the talk and all the smoke blowing, utterly incompetent. And the corruption, the fact that his number 2 chosen law enforcement guy is in federal prison right now, because under this Attorney General and under this Attorney General's father before him, that guy was buying and selling this state for cash, should concern you. You have the ability to go back to that. That kind of corruption, that kind of boss hog mentality, we deserve better than it. We do. So I just ask you, please be engaged, vote. I would rather you vote against me than not vote. Too much sacrifice has been made for us to be able to have the ability to go to the ballot box. But it's important to think about what's best for our state. What questions on any front at all?
Okay, we've got a bunch of questions. How do you plan on stopping the increase of personal injury lawyers who are going after small business with frivolous cases just to settle out of court?
Again, you want to talk about a big difference? You want to see any kind of tort reform versus 0 for the next 4 years? You look at how much tort reform there has been in the last 4 versus the 40 before that. If on that issue alone you can't determine who to vote for, you're not following along very closely. I am a big proponent of doing exactly this. What we need is tort reform. What we need are the kind of common sense things that we have attempted to do, but interestingly, one of those was trying to bring medical review panels into the process associated with the medical arena. It's not unlike this. The retailers, if you're a retailer, you know for a fact that if you don't have cameras everywhere, I talked to a fellow who owns several hundred different retail outlets. He said, hey, his cameras, you can watch on the camera. People go out, throw themselves on the ground, realize it didn't look quite right, get up, do it again, throw themselves down, literally. And he said, unless I had video to show this in court, then my insurance company wants to settle up with them. And for any of you in the insurance industry, you understand sometimes it's easier just to pay someone $25,000 or $50,000 than to battle something in court. That has got to change. I'm running against a guy who literally has been funded in large measure by Morgan & Morgan. That's no exaggeration. You have a choice between two people, for governor and attorney general on the other side of the aisle, who are fully funded and or are partners at Morgan & Morgan. God bless them. They're for some of the people, I'll say that, but I don't know that they're the people that are in this room. So what we need is tort reform. And that medical review panel bill that was signed into law after being passed by our legislature following the process of law, who challenged it? Our attorney general did. And they got our whole Supreme Court so panicked that they overturned this thing 7-0. The same bill was upheld by the Supreme Court in Indiana, 7-0 in the other direction. I mean, come on, really? We need tort reform in a big, big way in this state. It's not going to happen under the alternative to myself, I can say that.
This morning, we had our regional public policy group together, 8-county area, and one of the big issues we talked about was infrastructure funding. It's key for business and economic development. Tell us your plans to help pass a funding package in 2020.
It's going to have to happen in 2020 simply because all the toll credits are gone. This could be a long conversation. I'll make it short. We need more dollars. We do not need the dollars for everything that we need to have done on the barrelhead. What we need is a revenue stream that can be dedicated so it's not just an increase of dollars, it's the absolute definitive legislatively mandated focus of those dollars being applied to pay down bonds that will be taken out and pay down over the next 20 years using these road dollars so that we can infuse those billions of dollars and pay back the principal interest in the decades ahead. Has to happen. And I applaud efforts that have been made. Let me just tell you, among all of us, I'd be hard-pressed to find anyone in this room who dislikes unnecessary taxes more than me. But the reality is everything we want, the education of our children, the roads and infrastructure, the protection and service provided by law enforcement people, these things that we need and want paid for by taxpayer dollars. So we're going to pay. And the question is, to that question, what is going to be done? 2020, that's another can that has been kicked down the road and kicked down the road. When I was elected, we had $6 billion worth of deferred maintenance on bridges alone. There were 57 bridges and overpasses that had just been shut down by the previous governor. Instead of fixing them, you just shut them down, people would have to drive around. That's insane. And why? Because it's easier. You don't get credit for fixing a bridge. You know, it's more fun to give money to some new program and pretend it's you who did it when it's really taxpayer money. So mark my words, it's going to have to happen. I'm going to take point on it because, in fairness, I don't think there's any legislator who wants to take the amount of crap that's going to be associated with it, and I don't blame them. It's not their fault. They're going to ultimately be the 138 men and women that are going to have to make it happen, and there are good ones among them. Sal Santoro has tried for a couple years to move the needle on this front, and we couldn't even get this thing out of committee. But it will come out of committee. It's going to have to. We cannot kick this down the road anymore. We need billions of dollars invested in our state infrastructure. And in 2020, the day is upon us to get it done.
What are your plans for funding of public education?
The same thing it is now. And how is a public education funded? By the taxpayers. 3 things that I'll let you know. Number one, the highest we've ever put into our education system per pupil. It's called the SEEK formula. It's the per pupil spending. The highest per pupil spending in the history of Kentucky, which is not just as high as it has previously been, it's higher than it has ever been per pupil, is under this administration, when it was raised to that highest ever level. It is also the most in absolute dollars, even though it's not commensurate with an increase in students. There's more absolute dollars and more money per pupil going into our public education K through 12 system than ever before. On the post-secondary front, I'll come to that in a moment. We were told 30 years ago, for those of you who lived here, when the lottery was brought in, it was going to fuel our imaginations and fund what? Yeah, how many of you really think that's where all the money went? It hasn't, and everybody knows it. The money hasn't gone there. Some of it has. For the last 4 years, the only 4 in 30 that 100% of the lottery money has gone to education is under this administration. Why? Because I believe when we tell people something, goes back to the promises that we've made on any number of fronts. As a state, we owe them Whether it's a pension, whether it's lottery money, whether it's clef money for law enforcement, these are things the previous governor took $117 million out of the clef funds, which were intended for law enforcement, while they never saw any increase in bonuses or compensation for training, and spent it on other things. 100% of that money has gone as well. So whether it's the funding for that, whether it's that, or whether it's just funding the teacher's pension, funding education, I'll tell you want to make sure there's somebody there to educate our kids, fulfilling the promise we made to people to make sure that the pensions they've been promised are actually there. And I'm telling you, they're fast on track to insolvency. They're not going to be there on the track we're currently on, and that's the hard, brutal reality. It's not a political statement. It's a statement of math. It's finances, it's actuarial and demographic reality. That's the reality of it. We can come back to that, I hope. My commitment is to see us spend more. I have 9 children. They're between the ages of 9 and 20. I care probably as much in my household about education, primary, secondary, post-secondary, as probably any family in Kentucky. This matters tremendously. But the only way we have more money for anyone, including at the post-secondary level, where they have had less monies in recent years than they've ever had historically, because a result of what's been going on for the last 15 years, those budgets have been getting cut. They've leveled off, but they're still below where they were even 10 or 12 years ago. The only way they get restored is not by somebody standing here and promising you they're going to do it. Where's the money going to come from? We're going to take it from the roads? We're going to let 57 more bridges collapse, and then we'll put the money into higher education? We're going to stop, providing for law enforcement? We're not going to build any new, byways or on-ramps or what have you? I mean, where's the money going to come from? We're going to raise your taxes? The bottom line is we do need more money focused, but we also need to focus it like a laser. Last thing I'll say on this is one thing I've asked our post-secondary world to do, and that we've started to do, is we're moving entirely to our post-secondary funding being based on outcomes, outcome-based funding. Because with all due respect, your tax money should not be subsidizing people that are studying interdisciplinary dance, or interpretive dance or whatever. I mean, God bless that. If you want to study it on your dime, fair enough. But the taxpayer should not be subsidizing something for which there is no market right now. Just shouldn't be happening. And so I've asked universities, focus on your ability. What are your core strengths? What are the areas where you can put people into the workforce who become taxpayers, who become part of this virtuous cycle of raising our revenue so that we can afford all the other things we want? And our universities are leaner and more nimble than they have ever been. Still a ways to go, but there are good things happening on this front. And it will only come when we get more people living here, more people paying taxes here. We'll have the money to do all the things we want.
What will you do differently in the next 4 years to address the pension issue than you have done during your first term?
I'll keep trying to get people to take this seriously. I've never personally been a part of the 12-step program, but my family and probably every family in here has had somebody who has been. So I think pretty much everybody knows that the first step of a 12-step program is you got to admit you have a problem. That literally is the first step. It's the same for the pension problem. And again, headline guarantee from somebody will be Bevin says, people in the retirement system are drunks, but that's not what I'm saying. I mean, seriously, I'm not even kidding. That's the kind of idiocy that passes for headlines these days. It's all about sensationalism. It's about trying to impugn things or conflate things and no ability to think thoughtfully or to have any kind of intelligent discourse. We seem to be in a post-intelligent discourse world, sadly, but that doesn't make these problems go away. The pension issue is the worst funded pension in America. It's not fixed. I'll give you 2 quick examples. KERS non-hazardous, which has, 100, 200,000 people in it. It has 13 cents of every dollar that has been promised to people. It ended the year with about $3 billion in total. It paid out $1 billion in benefits. It took in $100 million. How many years do you have left? You don't need to have been a math major. You got 2 or 3 years and it's over. It's out of money. Then where does that $1 billion a year come from for the next 25, 30 years? You. Except, guess what? You're already paying that into all these other plans. The pension is already costing us 15% and rapidly rising, so that over the next few years it'll be 20, 25, and 30% of our overall state budget. So currently 15% of every tax dollar you send to Frankfurt goes to paying for a single-digit number of people out of our population that are already retired and not working and climbing. How much of your tax dollar at a certain point, for us to be able to fix this problem, The question is, how much will I continue to fight? As much as is necessary to get people to fix this problem. The only way possible to make it work is to structurally change it for future employees. That drives people crazy. That'll make all the little thumbs go nuts in the back of the room. But the reality is this, it's true, it's math. It's math. You cannot continue to promise people things that we don't have the money to back up. And think about this, how many of you in this room, especially if you're under 50, most of us are over that, but even if you're under 50, say, how many do you think that you're really going to see Social Security? Everybody knows it's broke. It's been broke for a long time. Why? Because of this. Because there used to be 30 people paying in for every retiree. Now it's shrunk down to the point there's only 3.5 people paying into Social Security for everybody drawing out in America. And it's collapsing, and everyone knows it. Guess how many people are paying into Kentucky's retirement systems collective versus those that are drawing out? Guess where we are? No one believes Social Security will last, and they're 3.5 to 1. We're less than 1. Less than 1 to 1. It's broken. It's over. You can hate me all you want, but it's going to collapse under whoever the next governor is if we don't address it. You cannot keep promising people that you can start working at 22 and retire at, in your 40s or early 50s and live for the rest of your life and with high 3s and high 5s and accruing of this and accruing of that and multiplying of this and multiplying of that. It is not mathematically possible to keep giving that to people. Let's honor the promises that have been made to people. This is what I'm adamant about. Let's do to the best of our ability, but a promise is only as good as there is money to back it up. And if there is no money, we will see happen here what we've seen in cities like Detroit. We're a state, but surely if there's no money, things collapse. Think about this real quickly, and I don't mean to beat this to death, but this is important for you as business people to understand and to communicate to people. And it's not all business people in here. We have educators, we have nonprofit people, we have a lot of people in here. If you start, let's say, at 22 and you retire at 52, let's just say you're an educator. Let's say you're in KTRS, and so you can get a 3.0 multiplier, which is the highest you can get based on your years of service, and you have your high 3s, and you have your accrual of this and that. And you maximize everything, and there's not one of us, myself included, that would not take full advantage of everything. It's like a tax refund. You're going to take it if it's offered. So why shouldn't you do it? But the question is, can we afford to keep offering it? If you start at 22, you retire at 52, currently the most anybody pays in is 13%, and that's a lot, but nobody has done that historically over their lifetime. The average KTRS paycheck last year for the people who retired in the last 12 months, the average starting on day one, and it goes up 1.5% automatically every single year, plus free health care for life, leaving those two things aside, $62,374 a year. So that's the average starting. And as soon as you say, well, that's not what I'm getting. That's not, sure enough, it probably isn't. But that means someone's making a whole lot more than you, because that's the average. There's people making 6 figures. Greg Stumble, who wants to be the next Attorney General, already draws over $90,000 a year, every year for the rest of his life on your dime, whether he gets elected or not. I mean, he's already retired from state government. This is the problem, is that financially it's not possible. So let's say you start at 22, you retire at 52. You're going to live to be 92 years old. Let's just say it's only 60, and let's say there is no COLA, and let's say there is no health care. From 52 to 92, that's $2.4 million. $2.4 million that you're going to make in retirement. Nobody has paid 13% in all of the way along, but let's just say you had made $60,000 a year. And let's say the average of what you had put in over all of those years was 10%. That means 60 times 30, $180,000. If you'd put in $180,000, in what world that any of you are aware of can you put away $180,000 in 30 years and then take out $2.4 million over the next 40 years? Where does that mathematical wizardry come from? What investment vehicle is that? I'd like to sign up for some of it. It doesn't exist. It only existed when you had this. When there were more people down here than there are here, it's now inverted. It's over. It's broken. It's bankrupt. That's hard, brutal, factual reality. And so think about this. People say, well, I put my money in, I better get my money out. If you put in $180,000, and trust me, there's probably no one in Kentucky who's actually put away $180,000 out of their paycheck. There probably is nobody. But let's just say you did. How many years does it take you before you get your own money back? Under that scenario, which is not a hypothetical one. That's an actual, conservative one. 3 years. You retire at 52. By the time you're 55, you got your own money back. It's not your fault. You didn't make the rules. But my point is this: we can't keep promising this to people. It is not possible. How many of you in the private sector are still actively involved in a defined benefit plan? Shocker. I mean, of course you're not. Why? You wouldn't be in business. There's only so much we can get from the taxpayer. 15% is already a remarkable percentage of our budget. We have to structurally change it, and we have to force future governors and future legislatures to fund the current unfunded liability, whether they want to or not. I am the only governor in the history of Kentucky to ever even fund what is called the actuarially required contribution, the bare minimum amount to keep our underfunded status from falling farther behind. I am the only governor in history to ever do it, which is pathetic. The governor before me took $8 billion out, as did others, both by not putting dollars in, and some even before that, literally when we were fully funded or overfunded, because nobody looked at demographic reality, they took monies out. We've created a big problem. It's over $60 billion in unfunded liability, and we have to stop the structure for future employees, and we have to go to level dollar funding, where you take the current $60 billion, call it, break it into tranches of 30th, and force future governors and future legislators not to optionally do it, as I've done because it's not required, to force them by law to put $2+ billion in for the next 30 years. That's the only way it doesn't collapse. So we could talk about it more, we won't.
Okay, thank you for the work you have done on behalf of our state. Going into the election, what is the one issue that you are most passionate about?
Have I talked about pensions? Have I mentioned that? And here's the thing, it's a political loser. It makes people fired up. It gives sensational headline possibilities to people. It allows you to find the 2 or 3 people that are you only need 2 or 3 that don't get it but are passionate about how they're being done wrong. This is affecting every one of you. It affects the credit rating of the state, which affects your businesses. It affects our ability to attract people to be here. If I'm allowed to pick a second thing that I care a lot about, and there are many, I'll say a couple. Number one, we've got to modernize our tax code. We need to get rid of inventory tax. We need to get rid of death tax. We need to address our road dollars. We need to consider things like local option sales tax. We need to do a lot of things to modernize what we do or don't do in this state. A lot of this has to be done. We have to be honest about it. We need to move to more of a consumption-based tax base where we get to choose how much we spend and where, and not a production-based. Why are we punishing the job creators and the wealth producers? They're going to pay it one way or the other. Let them dictate where their dollars go once they produce them so that they can pay it into payroll, Capex, what have you, all of which generates more dollars for our schools and for other things, consumption that people get to spend. The strongest economies in our country are in states that have moved in that direction. We've cut by 17%. I'd like to see us have 0% income in corporate taxes in this state. We'll have plenty more to pay on any number of fronts, including sales tax. But why are we punishing the producers? Let's get our money from the consumers. Then we, the people who've earned the money, we get to choose. We'll still get our money one way or the other. I think we'll get more because more people will want to live here. Another final thing I'll mention is adoption and foster care. It's still so broken in this state. In adoption and foster care, we have now 10,000 kids in our foster care system. Of those 10,000 kids, 2,500 are fully available to be adopted. And I will say to this is people who not only have the capacity, but many of your employees do, to be part of the solution. Give me just 2 minutes to talk about this, because this is something I'm passionate about. 4 of our 9 kids are adopted, so I'm not asking you to do something that I don't understand the cost on any number of fronts of it. But I'll tell you this, how in a state of 4.5 million people, how in a state where there's 6,500 houses of worship, where there's some every given weekend and weekdays, variations of being our brother's keeper, or treating people the way we want to be treated, or being the hands and feet of Christ, or taking care of widows and orphans, there's some version of that in every one of these houses of worship on any given week. And out of 6,500 houses of worship, we can't find one home for every 2.5 houses of worship for a kid who needs a home. Come on. And this is what we know about these kids if they age out. A kid who's 18 years old ages out of the foster care system and is now an adult and is dumped out in America, and there's 470,000 such kids in the United States of America. And a kid who's 18 and ages out, by the time they're 19, what we know nationally, that 31% of them become arrested for something by the time they're 19 years old. More than half of them end up chronically or perpetually homeless. 54% of them will never even get a GED, let alone a high school graduation. If they are women, they are almost statistically guaranteed to be trafficked, to be abused, to have children out of wedlock that are born into cycles of abuse and poverty, and it's perpetuated. You go into our prisons, there's 2 million people right now in prison in America, from local jails up to the federal penitentiary. Guess what percentage of every one of those 2 million people is that came out of our foster care system? 70. Guess what the percentage of people on death row is that came out of our foster care system? 81. This is a massive problem. And we are spending billions and trillions trying to put broken adults back together again. And we don't have enough money, we don't have enough beds, and we don't have enough programs to do it. But we're doing it because we allow them when they're on our watch, and they should not be, but they are, because we haven't opened our hearts and homes to giving these kids a shot. And so they're being raised by government at a cost in this state of $50,000 per year for kids that are in foster care, to then end up being left to the wolves and end up breaking, and they're breaking on our watch. At $50,000 a year, how can we not be deploying these dollars? And this is a federal problem too. And I'm working with the White House to try to get this president and people on his team to address this from the top down, because we've never had anyone in American history do it out of the White House. But to meet states like us from the bottom up. We are failing young people tremendously. And we know we're doing it, and we're not doing enough to fix it. And this is something we've made great strides, and we have many other people now coming to the state to look at the things we've done, and yet we still have so far yet to go. These are the things, too, that you get to choose in 3 weeks. Who's going to lead on this front?
I think we understand your passion. How do you make Kentucky the leader in energy production within the United States?
It depends on how you define energy production. I mean, I'll tell you, the energy landscape is shifting. One thing we are rich in more than other states is coal. And here's what I'll tell you, whether you like coal, don't like coal, think it should or shouldn't be a part of our energy landscape, there's more coal being consumed now in the world than there ever has been in the history of the world. We sit on an abundance of it, 2 massive seams. The Central App Basin, we've got the Illinois Basin, we've got met coal, steam coal. We're blessed with an abundance of it, decades worth of it. This country, more than any country on earth, knows how to turn it into energy cost efficiently, effectively, environmentally sensitive by far compared to anywhere else in the world, not even close. And yet we're suffocating this amazing resource that we sit on top of. At what cost? Think about this. When the polar vortex came in, which we used to call cold weather, now we have terrible names that make us panic and everyone has to stay home. But again, that gets people fired up if you imply that somehow we didn't have cold weather in, I don't know, the 70s, 80s, 90s, ever. That said, during the polar vortex, there was a few days of really cold weather that happened last winter, typically in this region of the country, because our electrical grid is broken into sections, into components. In this section that goes from Michigan down to the Gulf that we're a part of, typically coal produces 27, 8, 9% of the average energy that we consume, lights, heat, etc. High 20s. During the polar vortex, how much do you suppose it spiked to? 61, 2, 3%, over 60%. It tripled. It more than doubled, I should say. Now, how is that? Why is that? Why didn't we just turn up the windmills? Why didn't we make them blow faster? Why didn't we just turn the sun on and tell it to heat up those little panels a little bit better? I'm not trying to be pejorative of these things, but the reality is you can't make the sun shine brighter. You can't make the wind blow. The only thing you can do is actually pile up coal and use it. So when it got cold, and even though they were in Michigan telling businesses that you had to power down production, massive companies, not unlike some that you represent, were being told to idle people and power things down so that they had enough to allow people to power up hospitals and homes. But they were telling people, turn all your thermostats down to 60, I forget what it was, 60-something degrees at a max. I mean, my goodness. And what were they doing? The very TVA plant that they were at that exact time of the polar vortex talking about how it was outdated, unnecessary, we didn't need it or want it because we were going to a new, more enlightened, greener, more sensitive version of the future that you can't actually provide for, but it looks good on paper. Kind of like the guy I'm running against. That said, you know, these were the things that were being promised to people, but what did they do with that very plant? They forced people to work overtime. It was working 24 hours around the clock. Why? Because we needed energy. People will freak out when they flip a switch and they can't get it on. So how do we become an energy leader? Let's take advantage of what we have, number one, but this is a bigger problem than just Kentucky. This is an issue for America. We don't have reliability. We don't have sustainability. We're not being thoughtful about our energy grid and having a true energy plan. We used to have an energy plan that related to oil, and we would store things, and we need to be smart about the fact that there is, whatever the future looks like, the bridge from where we are to whatever the future energy landscape looks like is going to be built out of coal of necessity. It is the number one contributor to electricity production in the world, and that's not going to change anytime in the foreseeable future. There are other things that we have here. We have a lot of abandoned mine lands. We are working right now to take advantage of a lot of these open spaces that don't have infrastructure or other immediately usable ways to use them, and we're putting solar fields. We're talking to people both in this country and outside of this country about what can be done to take advantage of space. So let's get electricity that's generated by solar and by wind and whatever. I am for all the above, but I'm also realistic that until we can capture this and store it with battery technology that allows it to be held, not just used as it's generated, it will never, despite our desire to have it be what we would hope and want it to be. We need to make sure that we have the energy that we need for our growth. And so to that end, I think the key is make sure we're wise and good stewards of what we already have.
Based on our time schedule, this will be our last question. Kentucky was once the largest producer of hemp. This agriculture product can be important in energy, health, and manufacturing. What is your plan?
There are right now about 1,000 people in Kentucky that are growing hemp maybe a plot the size of this stage, it may be 1,000 acres. But there's 1,000 of them, literally, that are growing hemp at some point. And there are any number of derivations of that product, CBD oils in particular, a lot of variations of that. There are fibers that are used in everything from clothing to dashboards on cars to you name it. We are blessed with seasonally and from just a soil standpoint as good a place as anywhere in America to be able to grow this product. It is estimated that based on the amount of crop that it could generate as much as $100 million even this year of products sold. But here's what I will tell you, all that glitters is not gold. Not that it could not be, but we have already found some of the people who have invested the most here are struggling right now. They've gotten out in front of their skis a little bit, and it's not their fault. The market's not ready for it, and CBD oil prices, which were expected to be X, are now some fraction of X. And people's capital expenditures that were expected to be, justified over the lifetime, and that they would be amortizing certain expenses that they'd incurred based on certain expected revenue, it's not there, and the markets are not yet there. Do they have the potential to be there? They do. Do I think that they will be in some measure? Yes, because globally there's demand for this. But truth be told, we're not there yet. Even now, and I say this just as a reality, when I ask people what's the number one contributor to our state's GDP, I hear a lot of things. People think it's bourbon, they think it's horses, they often think agriculture collectively. Agriculture is maybe 3.5% of our GDP. And this is a tiny, tiny rounding error piece of that. It's not insignificant, it's real, and it makes a real difference for people. But there's not a chance in the world that this has the ability to fill in for all of the mismanagement and fiscal irresponsibility that has led to the things we've been talking about thus far. And so to that end, I'm a big proponent of it. I'm a guy who grew up raising crops, and I understand the value of this for subsistence purposes as well as for an economy. So let's be smart. Let's come alongside people as we are. Let's invest in things as we are doing and have in the last 4 years in research centers in Western Kentucky in conjunction with our universities and with the private sector to investigate ways to use this and any number of other crops as well. There's a lot that we can do, This is an exciting crop, but it's not going to be what some would hope it to be, at least in the immediate future.
Governor, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you very much for your time.
Let me just say, I don't know if it's televised, perhaps it is, but tonight there's a debate between myself and the Attorney General. Tune in. I mean, should be fun. Thanks.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you very much to Kentucky American Water, Nick, and also congratulations, Nick, there you are, on your new role and leadership. Thank you for stepping up, and for your team to step up to work with you. Thank you all very much. Please watch the debates, and remember this Friday, we have the Attorney General, Andy Brashear, coming in, and so I hope you'll be at that event too, to be able to ask him questions and hear his vision for Kentucky.